So for me, 2021 recap, deer season recap would be something that was important for me was this was my first full year of hunting ever. Started in 2020, but it wasn't a full season for me and I didn't get that into it fully. So this would be the year for me where I put the effort into working the property with the rest of everyone from Angel Road. And you sort of get to that point where it's end of September and you can feel like the culmination of all of that hard work that we put in to that property, especially with the weather that happened over the summer season and the spring, even fall, with all the trees going down. We had a lot of work to do on the property, and you just put those hours in and all that sweat, hard work. And then you get to that point where you're driving down to the property for the very first weekend of deer season. And it's one of those feelings for me being my first year hunting where you almost never forget it. It's like nostalgic, but coming from someone who doesn't have years to create that nostalgia, it just happens. You're driving. We have about a 1.5 hour, 2 hour drive, and you just start to feel the excitement of just pulling into, obviously we go to a campground, so we're sleeping in your travel trailer, but you just get excited to pull in for that first weekend and park at the travel trailer and get out, see everybody there, and just know that the following morning you're about to bust buns out into the woods or the field or wherever you want to start and just have that feeling. And I used to think, for me, I don't know how you can get into hunting. And I used to say it to you all the time. I don't think I could deer hunt. I don't think I could sit and wait and not have anything happen. But starting in 2020, I got a little nippy taste on my lips and I wanted more, and finally was starting to get that vibe and that feeling of excitement to just be in the woods, one with nature, and see what happens.
What do you think it was that put that taste in your mouth?
Well, I think we have, like, Angel Road to us has special meaning, and I actually wasn't fortunate enough to get to meet Ed, the owner of the property at the time. I came in after that, but there's still like a respect for like his woods. It kind of becomes something you honor, you take care of it as it's something for him almost. Even though I didn't get to know him, I got that connection through you guys, you, Nate, and Head. So I think being out in those woods compared to the first time you dropped me off in the dark in the morning and I had to go about 50 yards and couldn't find my tent that morning, to learn the woods, know where you're going without light even, I think it just becomes special. And then to me, it's a unique area for us because you have the windmills everywhere. You've got every little bit of nature around you as far as fields, woods, the black walnuts, and you get to experience all that. And it's just something that I think as any human, man or woman, you connect with. You guys are very into the cameras and studying the sort of the where you see them and what time you see them and where they're going to be, and sort of having a like knowing from camera footage where they're going to be. And for me, I never got into that, and I still am not into that, and maybe I will be later, but it was more just I go off a feel. I try to become the animal. So, and I know that sounds silly, but it's actually kind of true. I think the joke was that with 4 of us, 3 or 4 of us, depending on, or even just 2 of us down at the property, you got to kind of know where everybody's going to sit. You don't want to be too close to each other, and you don't. So I think the joke became, "Hey Adam, where you sitting?" So then everybody was constantly asking me where you sit, because I never had an answer. I never have an answer. First thing in the morning, 5:00 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning. Hey Adam, where you sitting? And because I came in as the fourth sort of person to be part of Angel Road and hunt this property, we have enough stands and tents to where we weren't going to put new ones up. I wasn't going to buy a bunch of new ones and throw them up. There's just not the space for it. So I respectfully like to hear where the old guys are going to hunt. So I get nestled into my pop-up tent first morning of deer season, and you have that excitement. And unfortunately, opening weekend was really kind of a dud for everybody. I did see some doe, and I had a spike come through. Actually, I was excited that there was a decent doe coming right in front. I would say probably 15 to 20 yards in the tent, in front of my tent, and I was like ready to go on her, thinking it was a doe, and she was super curious about me, which to me is always kind of a red flag. Like, that to me is telling that it's a younger animal. As it got closer, I realized it had little spikes, so it was still cool to see. There was still, I find it exciting to watch the animals, move around, but they were all, fawns or less, and then the spike. So nothing super exciting happened opening weekend, but it just felt good to get down there and sort of get your feet wet. And then I think from there, for me, it was a progression into the rest of the season, obviously. But for me, I mean, getting deeper and deeper into how I'm going to hunt. So then we had, I think we consistently hunted, at least I know you and I did, every single weekend. But I think it would be the following weekend was the weekend of October 9th. I once again chose to, it had to have been Saturday morning, I chose to sit in what we call the black walnuts, because they are black walnuts, on the property. And it's not far from where we park. It's a pop-up tent, and there's a lot of action in there. And we really don't quite know why it's such a highly traveled area. But it is, and we have talked about before how it's just this sort of odd anomaly that the deer are traveling through these black walnuts, which were planted by Ed, the property owner, I don't know how many years ago. But it's a cool area because it is a little cutout space between two fields and before the woods, lined with pines. So that morning I am sitting in my tent, and it's a high fog morning. And what I like to do is, as soon as I start to get some daylight, I like to shoot distance. So I'm picking certain trees, things I can mark, like that's 20 yards, that's 30 yards, that's 40 yards. And there is a scrape on it's an small oak tree. And you guys have had a camera on it for a long time, and it gets a lot of action. So that was one of my main, points of view, was to look at this small oak. And it's hard for me to see. So I'm texting you, and we will text on occasion, actually quite a bit. And I'm saying, hey, you have any idea the distance to the camera? Because the camera's right by the oak tree. And I'm not sure you responded right away, but you might have said, I think it's 60 yards or something, or 50 yards. So, because what was happening was what I used to shoot distance was I could not read anything because the fog was too thick and it just wasn't light enough. So I'm like, shoot, being newer, I studied all summer on distance without an actual, tool to shoot the distance. I wanted to feel what was 10 yards, 15 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards, and so on. So I did practice with that, but I had yet to feel fully comfortable with that. So I was a little worried about my distances that morning. And then all of a sudden, it was not long after first light, you can just see several, I say several because to me there was 3 or 4 or even 5 massive bodies slowly moving along this pine line on the edge of the black walnuts, cruising right into that scrape. And so my blood starts pumping. They were big enough to the point where I knew that the first 2, they were bucks. The first 2 bucks I saw, I knew without a doubt that they were shooters. And so I'm watching them through my scope, and the adrenaline's rushing, and I'm like, this can't be possible. For me, this was my first time in person experiencing a buck, seeing a buck. 2020 was all doe, never saw a buck. So I just couldn't believe it. So you have a million things running through your mind, and I'm thinking, what is their distance? First of all, it's foggy. It's light enough to see that they're huge bucks. And then come to find out later, there was actually another one coming perpendicular into those 3. So I had picked the second buck, and I even think I told you guys, it was almost like watching, like if you ever watch the videos of like a whale shark underwater and you see their body just moving. It was just these massive bucks rolling through the fog slowly. And that excitement just sort of...
on camera?
I will talk about that in a minute. Because I will say, opening weekend, I was very good with my camera. I got a lot of those doe and that spike on camera, even a salamander. However, the last thing going through my mind was to turn the camera on. Because keep in mind, I haven't seen a buck in person ever. And I'm seeing one that is massive. Better than that, there's 2 or 3 that are massive. So I picked the second one, looked the biggest. I can see his rack, and it's huge, which we all love big racks. And I just said, you know what? To me, that looks 40 yards. So I picked 40 yards. I rolled with it. He came into this opening. All of the black walnuts are planted in rows. So there's these like angled lanes. And he came right between, stopped. I didn't even have to make a noise. He stopped, picked at something, and I just fired. And it sounded great. You know, like you smoked a bucket. And he jumped in the air, all 4, hoofy doofies in the air, and he took off. And within a second, it seemed like he went 20 yards to my right and cut straight back into the pines. And I instantly, you start freaking out. To me, this is all new. You start shaking, and you have sort of this adrenaline let down sort of thing that happens to you. And instantly I grab my phone and I say, holy shit, buck down.
Good morning, Adam. It's 7:50, and my brother Adam said he just shot a buck. So we're going to give it a little bit and then go catch up with him and do some tracking. So it's a good Saturday morning to everybody out there hunting. I think we got a buck down.
That seems to be kind of the text that happens. But, and somebody was like, Head might have said something like, are you kidding? I just couldn't believe it. And it felt really good. So then what I'm experiencing for the first time this season is when something like that happens within, you guys are all like, hey, let's wait 45 minutes to an hour, and give it some time to, die. Yeah. And nobody else, and it sucks because I don't want to ruin everybody's hunt, because there's 3 other guys in the woods hunting, and this is first thing in the morning. So not only do we want to give it time, which this is all learning for me, we want to give it time to not spook it and jump it before it's actually, taking a dirt nap. But so within that time frame, you go through a lot of different emotions, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't understand. You go through this range of emotion where you start like you're shaking, you have to sort of like regroup, and then you start to process everything that happened. Was I looking at the right spot? Did I pick the right distance? And then you start to question yourself. So I'm texting and I'm like, man, I just don't know if it was 40 yards. I might have been high. I might have been low, so it's very odd. And you want to tell yourself, I think for me, it's, sort of planning for the worst, but hoping for the best. Being that it was my first one, I wanted it to be real, but I sort of counted on it, maybe, us not finding it or not being a great shot. So anyways, what happened right after that, I was fired up, and this doe walks in within probably 20 minutes. And I'm like, holy butt crack. I am going to shoot a big buck and a doe same morning within an hour. And for me, it was a learning experience, because I feel like the excitement of wanting that to happen, taught me the lesson to just not do it. I missed that doe and lost my arrow, which I later found impacted into a pine tree. But I wanted 2 in one day. She was a decent doe, but I completely missed because I was just too riled up. It's almost like I need to get to the point where you can do that, or you just need to set your shit down and wait until you track your buck. So once everybody was had decided that you guys were good with your morning hunt, we met where I was hunting and found some blood, and perfect spot to clean him. It was interesting that he died in that location. It was just like this, it was meant to be type of thing. So that was Buster, because he was a big 8-point. And for me, I feel like he was big for that time of the year. I mean, he was just a big body, but one of the points was was broken off at the tip, or it grew that way. I don't know. So we just decided that was Buster. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was a bully on the property. He was sort of running that property a little bit. There were bigger bucks there. Yeah. So, right. I'm not going to. So anyways, it was just this, it was a great moment, because that was my first buck, and it was a large buck, and we cleaned it up, gutted it out there, and then took him back and weighed him. And I think he came in at 190 pounds dressed. And I remember Head saying to me, "This is amazing, but let's just think about the fact that you may never see a deer this big again for 10 years, or maybe even 20 years. He's like, it took me 5 years before I even shot one. So It was great. It was a great experience, and that was my first buck, and he's on my wall. So what ended up happening was, I took him to the processor, and I wanted the head so that you could do your Euro mount for me. And this was the first time for me learning that experience. And I didn't do the full Euro mount, but I cleaned all the meat off the head, the skull, and then brought him to you, and you finished the process, and I've got him on my wall. So yeah, that would be my first buck is going to be for my second year ever, my first buck ever, second deer ever, second year ever. First buck is going to be unforgettable. I ended up liking that climber location. The first time I sat it, I actually had a couple smaller bucks. Actually, one of the bucks is the one that had, we have one on the property that had only one side of its antlers. And I loved, like, I wanted him. He was shaggy. He looked cozy. Decent size, but he, what would have just been a 4-point, which we have our, we sort of have our gentleman's rule of, we don't want to take anything under an 8. So he came within not 5 yards, but like, I would say, okay, 5 yards. He was just right in front of me. It's like we talked about this with the angle at which the deer are consistently looking, whether it's up to somebody in a tree or ground level. But I was 6 feet up in the air, and he didn't even know I was there. And then I had another deer come in from the same direction, and then I saw a doe about, I'd say 70 yards to my left. So I liked that area, and without knowing the property as well because of all of the paths being blocked, I felt like there could be travel down the middle of the property, which is where the climber was. So I knew going forward that I was going to try and use that area more. So not long after that, and I don't know which weekend it would have been, I was in the climber stand and had a good sized buck walk in on me, and I couldn't quite tell if it was a 6 or an 8. So he came in straight at me and sort of took a little bend off, and I would say was probably 20 yards out, and he stopped, and I had him in my scope. I had it right where I needed to shoot. I was ready to go. My finger was on the trigger. I decided that he was an 8. But he caught me, was staring at me. And before I pulled the trigger, I saw his ass through the scope. So I watched his butt run away. I took a booby hair too long. Can I say titty on here?
You can always beep stuff out.
I took a little tit hair too long and watched him leave me. That's how I feel. He left me. Should have been mine. I took too long. I don't know what you guys call it, buck fever. So I know that I was told I had buck fever, but I personally feel like I thought about it too much. I was trying to make sure he was an 8. I waited 1 second too long and I lost him. And that's fine because I got on my phone. I watched him run towards the black walnuts, and I'm in the woods. So I thought, I waited about a minute, I would say. And I could see he ran up almost to the end of the woods where the field is towards black walnuts. And then he turned and looked my way and then disappeared. So I got on the phone and I texted. I knew that Nate was sitting in black walnuts tent. I texted him and I said, hey, I just had a buck here take off on me, and I'm pretty sure he's heading your way. So just whatever. And within seconds, he texted back, I got him. There's never a 100% guarantee that it was the same buck, but I'm pretty sure it was. And he ran right into the black walnuts again. Hit that same scrape I got Buster, and Nate got him.